Financial argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we know the government and the agencies of the government, their mission is to get rid of the rights of the people. And the FBI, they have been whittling away at the Fourth Amendment for a very, very long time. And if you really look at the different laws that were passed, and I've always said this before, all of these laws mean the opposite. So when you ever hear something, they always put the title on there, and it never is what it really is. It's always the opposite of what they're trying to do. So when we look at the Right to Financial Privacy Act, which again has nothing to do with protecting privacy, it permits the federal agents to obtain certain bank records with search warrants issued by other federal agents as opposed to judges. So there's no privacy here. When we look at the Patriot Act, which has nothing again to do with patriotism, it enables the FBI agents to issue search warrants to other FBI agents for certain business records, including doctors, lawyers, offices, cars, jewelry dealers, the post office, as long as they're looking for threats to national security. Now, of course, they can say anything is a national security threat. It's wide open. The Electronic Communication Privacy Act, which interferes with the privacy of almost all electronic communications, permits the FBI agents to access certain metadata, the who, where, when of emails, but not their contents. Of course, they're getting their content. You can get that from the metadata. As long as one FBI agent issues the warrant to another, and as long as the recipient uses it for national security purposes, it is okay. They can bypass a judge once again. So all of this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, the Fourth Amendment was put into place so to be a pain in the neck for the government. It was expressly written to protect our individual right to privacy. It was also written to ensure the government can seek evidence against bad guys, but it was meant to force the government to target them based on real evidence, not to let them sweep it all up with the innocent people, with the bad guys, all into one group, and then basically spy on everyone and violate everyone's rights. But this is what the government is doing today. And they're convincing people with this ridiculous legislation that it's in your best interests. And we know it is not. Now, to take this a step further, we're starting to see the police use the civil asset forfeiture law that's in place to rob people of their hard-earned cash. And they can use any excuse of why they're taking your cash. And this reminds me of the olden days when people were riding on the path on their horses in their carriages, and the king's men would come up and say, hey, to pass here, you need to pay us. And they would take your gold, your silver, whatever you have. And that would be that. It seems like the same thing's happening today. But the police are taking it one step further. They are going to confiscate your prepaid cards, your debit cards, or your credit cards. Now, they're not just going to take them. They're going to actually take the money off of the prepaid cards or go into the debit card. Now, they're using a system called the Electronic Recovery and Access to Data Machine, a device that will take the digital money off the prepaid cards and put it into the police accounts. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol purchased 16 of these devices, and they began using them last month. And there are certain instances where troopers suspect someone. They will take their prepaid card, they'll take their debit card, they'll take their credit card, or any card with a magnetic strip, and they will take it, slide it through their new machine. It will generate information on the account, as well as either freeze or transfer the digital funds. Now, the way it works is that the Electronic Recovery and Access to Data Machine, it will send a signal disguised as a regular vendor request, so not to call attention to anything, and it will take whatever funds they want. And we can see right now that they're taking this to the next level. The next level beyond this is they're going to have devices where they don't even have to slide your card, because most of the cards are coming with that chip in them. And they'll just have to have a scanner walk by you, and they'll be able to take your money. And I've said this many times before. We all have to take responsibility into protecting everything that we have. And there's no reason to hand over any credit card, debit card, or anything like that to the police. But if they do take it to the next step and they use these scanners, that's going to be a problem. So we need to do whatever we need to do to protect ourselves. Because again, this is your hard-earned money. There's no reason for the police to confiscate something. They're infringing on your rights. I don't care what laws they enact, because no laws are above the rights of the people, the Constitution. And we need to protect ourselves. So with email, you got to use encryption. Doesn't matter. You need to use it somehow, some way. You need to secure your electronic information. You need to make sure that the government is not tracking you. You can use a product like Pocket at blockitpocket.com. These are like sleeves. You can slip your phone into it, your iPad into it. They even have the sleeves for credit cards where they're intertwined with metal. They block the signal so the scanners cannot remove the information. The government cannot track you on your iPhone. But whatever we're doing, we need to make it harder for law enforcement, make it harder for the government. Just like you lock your house up, just like you lock your valuables in the safe, you make it harder for everyone. You just don't let the police into your house unless they have a warrant. Same thing with your electronic data. Do you have a warrant? It is covered by my right under the Fourth Amendment. And of course they're going to say, no, we have this law. Well, that doesn't override my right in the Fourth Amendment. But whatever we do, we need to continually protect ourselves. Now, on the 67th anniversary of the publication of Orwell's 1984, we see that the U.S. government has its own version of Newspeak. And Newspeak is the official language of Oceania, and that is from 1984. And it's designed to make the ideological premises of INGSOC the only expressible doctrine. And Newspeak is engineered to remove even the possibility of rebellious thoughts. The words by which such thoughts might be articulated have been eliminated from the language. Newspeak contains no negative terms. For example, the only way to express the meaning of bad is through the word ungood. Something extremely bad is called double plus ungood. And we see the U.S. government central bankers, they're following this recipe. They started out with political correctness. They're starting to change words like the word convict. They don't want you to use that anymore. They don't want you to call these individuals criminals. And you can see they're continually doing this, changing the meanings of words, trying to use this type of wording. Actually, if you look at what's going on in Syria, they understood that the people were not thrilled with the U.S. government supplying weapons to terrorists, because we know Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, the Islamic State, they're all terrorists. So the U.S. government came up with a new word called moderate rebels, because it all came out a year or two ago that they were supplying weapons to Al-Qaeda. And people said, whoa, we're supplying weapons to terrorists? And they said, no. These are the moderate rebels. So they just changed the words around. We see the war on terror. This is a perpetual war. And it is ongoing, never ending. No boots on the ground means boots on the ground. And they lie about what these words actually mean. Because when we look at it, even John Kirby, the State Department spokesman, he was out there saying that we have no boots on the ground. There are no boots, and what you're seeing aren't boots on the ground. It's just not true. But we know there's 7,000 to 8,000 boots on the ground in Iraq. We know there's boots on the ground in Libya. We know they're in Yemen. We know they're in Syria. And many other areas. Ukraine. So all we're seeing right now is the U.S. government is actually following the 1984 book. And most of the people are being suckered into it. Now, as we look around the world, we see conflicts, war breaking out everywhere. In Africa, the Middle East, Europe, the Pacific. And there was a report that was published, and this is the 10th Annual Global Peace Index, where they say there's 10 countries which can be considered completely free from any conflict. Now, according to the Institute for Economics and Peace, this is a think tank which has produced the index for the past 10 years, there are only 10 countries: Chile, Costa Rica, Japan, Panama, Switzerland, Uruguay, Vietnam, and others that are completely free from conflict. Iceland was once again named the world's most peaceful country, followed by Denmark, Austria, New Zealand, Portugal. And we can see right now that war is building, conflicts are building all around the world, and most of it is due to the United States. We see regime change. We see the U.S. garrison current countries with soldiers. We see them provoking countries in the Pacific, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, and this is completely ongoing. We see there was a false flag in Israel where they're out there saying that there was a terrorist attack, and we see already that Israel has frozen entry permits for about 83 Palestinians during Ramadan, and it looks like they're building up troops, getting ready to do something. And of course they said this was a secret cell out of Jordan where they're part of the Islamic State, and it looks like they're using this as an excuse to go into the Palestinian region to remove those individuals once again. But we're going to have to watch and see how that plays out at this point. Saudi Arabia, they're threatening this week to break relations with the United Nations because the United Nations came out with a report that they are committing human rights violations in Yemen against children, against individuals. Saudi Arabia is very angry with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, saying this is ridiculous. We're not doing any of this. But of course, as we can see, they definitely are under the instructions of the United States. And what we're seeing right now is that watchdogs, individuals are calling these countries out on what they are doing. And we can see at this point that the United States government central bankers, they are orchestrating a lot of this, where they're having countries be their proxy force to go in and remove the people, the elected governments, and they want their puppet governments back in these countries. Now, if you look at Libya, you look at Lebanon, you look at Yemen, you look at Iraq, you see it's all happening because they replaced all these governments with puppet governments. The people are rising up and they're saying, we had enough, we don't want this. And of course, the U.S. can't bring troops into every single one of these countries. They don't really have authorization. They can use drone attacks against Al-Qaeda, which are the people in those countries which want the puppet governments out of their countries, but they need other countries to do their bidding. And this is why Saudi Arabia is in Yemen right now, pushing this hard. We see Syria right now. They approved aid convoys to all 19 besieged areas so they can have humanitarian aid come into these areas. And we see once again, Turkey is out there accusing Russia that they hit civilian areas in Aleppo. And this was between June 8th and June 9th. And Russia is saying, well, there's a problem with this because we didn't have any jets in that area. We were not striking Aleppo at that time. And we're starting to get a very clear picture of Turkey, the U.S., and the coalition forces. Every single time they hit civilian areas, or a hospital, or a school, or a wedding, they point their fingers at someone else and said, they did it. We see this every single time because we know at this time that Turkey was shelling the Aleppo area to allow the terrorists flow in from Turkey into Syria, into this certain area. And we can see at this point there is many reports coming out that it was actually Turkey that was doing this and not Russia, because Russia didn't even have jet planes in that area. And of course Russia says, we have proof once again. Would you like us to show you? Now we're getting word there are other countries that have boots on the ground. Now, we knew this was going to happen. We knew it wasn't just the United States. We just knew it wasn't the UK. Now France is coming out saying, yes, we do have troops inside of Syria. Now I'm going to say once again, there are many more countries with special op teams on the ground in Syria, inside of Syria, fighting. Now, of course, they're saying they're advisors. They're not going to be getting into any type of skirmish or anything like that. But we know this is fake, phony, and false. We know it's the opposite. Because what has happened is that the United States has been forcing the European countries, by releasing the refugees into Europe, creating chaos, using as a blackmail tactic, using Turkey to say, listen, if you want this to stop, you need to bring in military assets and troops into Syria. We need to get rid of Assad once and for all. And this is what we've been seeing, because Ashton Carter went around to all of these countries to convince them to bring in troops and military assets. And this is what we've been seeing. And we're going to see as we move further and further into this year, we're going to see that there's more and more countries that have soldiers on the ground. Now, this is an invasion of Syria because Syria did not give permission. It is a sovereign country. They didn't ask permission. They just invaded and brought soldiers onto the land, and they're doing whatever they want. Now, Russia was invited by the president. So we can see at this point, these coalition forces, they don't care because they have their goal. Now, the Russian military, they block communication to the terrorists, between Turkey and the terrorists, and they've been blocking these channels of communication, making it much harder for Turkey to let terrorists flow into Syria. And this is a problem. Now, we're getting a report that the U.S. and Turkey, they have come to a secret agreement to establish a two-security zone that will encompass the northern part of Syria near Aleppo. Now, of course, as we know, the United States says, no, we're not going to set up any type of zones whatsoever. Now, we know this is the opposite, because the more they say no, 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 that means they're working on it. And they know the world would not agree to what they want to do here. So they have to make it look like that they're not for this. In the meantime, in the background, this is exactly what they're doing. And I'm sure as time goes on, we're going to see these zones appear somehow, some way, maybe even as we get closer to August. Now, we're seeing more propaganda coming out from governments and the corporate news agencies that there's a huge threat of a dirty bomb terror attack on European cities. They're at their highest level since the end of the Cold War. Now, we can see at this point, they're using a lot of this propaganda to scare the people. They're using a lot of this propaganda to convince them that eventually when this next event occurs, you know exactly who it is. That's the Islamic State. They've been saying that the Islamic State and their secret cells have been staking out and studying the Belgian nuclear power plants. They've been looking at certain targets. And we have to remember something very, very important here, is that back in June of 2015, Israel was testing dirty bombs in the desert. And this came out of Haaretz, where they were experimenting on exploding a dirty bomb in a suitcase to see how the radiation would flow, what would happen. And now we're getting reports that there's going to be some type of dirty bomb. Now, does this mean it's only going to be in Europe? Well, we don't know, because very interestingly, we know that Obama came out with a warning when he was speaking to FEMA, saying that every citizen needs to prepare for a disaster, and that means taking proactive steps like having an evacuation plan, listening to FEMA, and wherever they tell you to go, wherever they tell you to evacuate, you must do it, which is very interesting. We also hear from DHS, and they are warning about evacuation plans in D.C. And what we're seeing right now is DHS has started monitoring commuter transit and determined that if a natural disaster or a terrorist attack occurred in the city, evacuation routes would face a crush of vehicles. And they want everyone to be prepared and ready to leave the cities at a moment's notice. Now, does the government know something that we don't? Is there something big coming down the pipe? Most likely, yes. Because we realize as we approach the summer, and we're counting down right now, 50 plus days, we have 2 warships and their strike group in the Mediterranean right now. We're getting word now that there's more countries that have boots on the ground inside Syria, when all along they've been telling us, no, there's no one in there. I don't know what you're talking about. We know the missile systems that were given to Turkey are now placed on the border. Jay Johnson was up in Turkey mapping out and securing the border and setting up surveillance of the border of Turkey. Bases are complete in Syria. We know Germany is upgrading the bases out in Turkey to bring in more advanced weaponry. We understand that the U.S. placed a travel advisory throughout Europe. We see France wants to remove the sanctions from Russia. Of course, the U.S. is completely opposed to this. We see France has come out with a disaster app to tell you where to go if something happens. All of this together, everything that we've been seeing with Obama, DHS, warning people about a disaster, the warnings about chemical weapons, the warnings about secret Islamic State cells, the warnings about dirty bombs, all of this together is telling us that they're getting ready and prepared to do something. And this is why everyone needs to be prepared and ready, because this will not stop the collapse. This will just cover it up. This will allow them to point their finger someplace else. So the collapse is not going to be called off. The economic collapse will continue, but again, they're going to change things around where they're going to say you have to sacrifice. There'll be food shortages. It'll be a very easy way to explain why all of these things are happening. And they can say it's because of Russia, China, cyber attacking, bringing down the financial system, the physical attacks that we most likely will see. All of this combined, they can explain away why we need to sacrifice, why there's no food, why there's no electric, why credit has froze up and stores, shelves are empty, why you can't get fuel. They will have an excuse. This is why everyone needs to be ready and prepared. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.